Yeah. We don't have. Have you started requirement? Not yet. I postponed it for a little bit. Yeah. And call Social Security back up and say, "Oh, send me a check." Going to the end of the year now.
Did anybody answer?
You know what? Actually, it's actually not that bad. It's a pretty quick process. Which I was surprised. And even the only problem that happened with Social Security through the process was my last name was spelled incorrectly, had an A at the end instead of O. So I had to go through the process. I had to go to the Social Security office out with them. Stole my ID, and that was the extent of it.
All right, we'll get the meeting started at a little bit after 1 o'clock. Anybody have any comments or anything to start off with? All right. Mr. Doug Anderson.
Thank you. So based on the last meeting, we had a discussion about the potential cost of the new plan based on different variables. And we talked about that the original cost estimate that was provided by the actuary, there you could get some different results from that by using really some pretty simple interpolating, prorating, and we could do that with the multiplier and with the annual full-term increase assumption. So this slide just summarizes that what the current general plan provisions are and the initial proposed plan study, which was based on an age 60 unreduced benefit, age 50 for an actually reduced benefits, a 2.2% multiplier, stability provisions that were the same as the general for the general plan, and annual increases that were using 100% of inflation with a 1% minimum, 2.5% maximum. So that was the agreed upon initial scenario for the initial cost estimate. So I want to be clear, PARA has no position at all related to this new plan. The PARA board did approve that study, and that study came with an initial study and one more alternative to look at. What we talked about is like, well, what's the next alternative to look at? And this work, if you go on to the next page, is intended to try to help narrow down to try to get what that next alternative is. So what so the easier part of this is kind of the starting point is look on the upper left side under the column that says annual increase assumption 2%, and you look at the benefit multiplier row of 2.2%. You see 19.1%. That was the baseline number. It's actually 19.08. But that kind of implies an awful lot of precision here. That really is a little misleading. So these are just rounded. 19.1 is just 19.08 rounded a little bit. And I want to explain the annual increase assumption first. And actually, I'm sorry, if we go back to the prior page, down at no, I'm wrong. Back to the page we were on. We look at the bottom of this page. There. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to explain this is that the PARA general plan and the PARA correctional plan provide a post-retirement increase that's tied to inflation with a minimum and maximum. The actuary makes an assumption about what the increase will be. They actually run 10,000 scenarios, look at all the different, and pretty much average it out, and they come back with a single equivalent assumption. So the middle column shows the current general plan formula, 100% of CPI, 1% minimum, 1.75% maximum. Our actuary says they end up using a 1.5% assumption. In other words, they say in the long run, that formula will end up averaging a 1.5% increase each year. You could look at it this a different way. You could say if it was a fixed plan, fixed rate plan with a 1.5% increase, this would have the same cost. So this formula has the same cost as a plan that provides 1.5%. That's what's happening here. Similarly, correctional plan, it has a higher maximum, so it has the potential for a higher average. The assumption there is it's a 2% annual increase. So now if we go back up to the top of the page, we're showing the assumption at the top of the page, the top row. Roll up there. So on the left, so there you see like the annual increase assumption, but that's the assumption reached. That makes sense. So the baseline number from the initial study was 19.1%. You could go down that row if you just want to know what's the impact of a lower multiplier. Just go down that row, see what the cost impact would be. And everyone's free to check the math here. You can divide by 2.2 and multiply by 2.1, and you get the 18.2. That's all there is going on there. And then similarly, left to right, it's also prorated. It's just not prorated using those exact assumption numbers. It's prorated based on formulas tied to those assumptions. So that's the grid of potential results based on different multipliers and full determined increases. To the right, it's just the numbers on the left, less 7.5%, based on the assumption that the employer contribution remains at 7.5%. That's it as far as my explanation. Any questions?
What is the annual increase assumption under the initial total plan cost? I don't get that term up there. What is the increased annually?
Sorry, could you?
Yeah, I just don't get, why does it say annual increased assumption? What is increasing here annually?
Okay, I'm sorry, that's the post-retirement benefit increase. What we're talking about there. The COLA to retirees.
So it shouldn't have the word annual.
Well, it is an annual increase that goes to them. So when someone retires, what we'd be looking at there would be saying, well, either the retiree would get a 1.5% increase each year, or 1.75, or 2%, or 2.25%.
So if it ends up being 2.25, then the cost of the plan will go up that year?
This would be the initial cost for the plan. So when the actuary did the initial study, they said the initial study was based on a 2.2% multiplier and a formula which was comparable to a 2% annual COLA increase to retirees. So that was their initial scenario. And under that result, the initial cost of the plan was 19.1%. And what we learned from the actuary is that that cost is expected to decline over time, gradually, but that's the initial cost, year one cost of that plan. What this is showing is that if you said, okay, instead of a 2.2% multiplier, we looked at a 2.1% multiplier, well, then this plan would cost 18.2% a pay in the first year, which would decline over time. Be a less costly scenario, but a little less cost.
That I get, I just terminology, I guess, I don't. That's fine. You get that.
Any other questions?
So maybe the last thing I would add on this part would be that what's not easy to provide is the answer about what if it's a different retirement age instead of 60. So if it's 62, we don't know how to interpolate that. And that's where we'd have to go back to the actuary. And we were holding on to that before. Last time we talked, it's like, let's hold on to that. Just look at the numbers that we can easily get. And then we'll come back, and our actuaries all queued up to look at that scenario. So if they did look at, say, age 62, or if this group directed whatever age, it actually then created a three-dimensional grid with the multiplier, the COLA, and the retirement ages. Unless you come back and say, nope, look at this multiplier and this post-retirement increase, just look at that and look at it at a different retirement age.
Doug, just to be clear, when you said the actuary you're holding that in reserve, you would not have to pay the actuary more to do one more calculation based on a change in one more factor like normal retirement age?
Susan, what the board agreed to provide was the initial cost study and one scenario. And so this would be the one scenario that we're going back to. So this part would be paid for.
Got it.
Well, I think like ideally it would be direct the actuary with a specific multiplier and a specific annual post-retirement increase and a specific retirement age. And then they update the study. And then the other piece of this was, there's a section of replacement ratio example. We showed some of these examples back during the first meeting or maybe the second meeting to try to give a sense of what does a plan provide. You look at what the benefit multiplier is for certain years of service. And what's the impact of post-retirement increases? Factoring in that there's a Social Security benefit for these members. So the first example was provided earlier. It's the same one, same example. This is under the general plan. If a member's hired at 25, has 37 years in the general plan, retires at 62, has a reduction for early retirement. It's an estimate of what their replacement ratio income would be and how it would change over time. This was provided before. And then we show 4 more examples on the next pages that show that same member, someone starting at 25, and we show examples of if they retire at 60 or 62 at different benefit multipliers. So you can see what the value of the multipliers are and the value of the post-retirement increases to give a sense of it. So to be clear, PAIR is not providing any recommendations. Board has a position, study, looking for direction on what you want our actuary to cost.
Maybe a statement. Speaking with our group, we don't have a desire to hear about 62. We went to the legislature with the age of 60 or 35. We'd like to find a reasonable solution with the age of 60. I really appreciate these charts. I call it the à la carte menu. Because looking at it and looking at the different comparisons, I'd like to save the actuarial for something else that we identify. I don't know what that is, but anyone in our group, feel free to speak up if I said anything wrong there.
And actually, I would add to that in terms of, I think one of the biggest concerns we have, looking at these charts is the fact that, we're still not getting at the heart of the issue of the group that is missing in this is the people that have past service credit, right? Our biggest concern really comes back to that past service credit issue and how we're gonna address that. That's where we have a lot of really big concerns of how do we address that? And where does that come in?
Anybody else?
Wait, Scott, I'll maybe say something nice. How's that? Well, part of the reason is that we had this discussion when we all met was, and we met with Amy last week. It was very helpful. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Is that on paper, when we were looking at the plan that we proposed to the legislature, it was a 1.7 multiplier. The cost of it was nothing more to the employer, so they liked it. And the cost to the employee was very similar to what this is coming across as. But our past service was included in that. And I'm looking at Courtney because I had a conversation with Susan and she felt that the amendment that she put through didn't have it, but our original bill had past service credit in it. It just, if I'm saying this right, Amy, you're a good teacher, but I'm probably going to screw it up. It's just that ours took longer to fully fund because of the cost, and it's a pre-funded expense. Did I do that even close to right?
You're also spreading it over other people, right? The past service component was spread by people who didn't have that past service and they're paying that cost.
Right.
And I can elaborate on that. I didn't.
Right. But if they're paying the same cost anyway, why is that a difference? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this new plan, they're paying for like their pre-fund, their portion of it. Your proposal had them pre-funding, or funding portions that weren't connected to them. So the new plan is directly connected to their compensation at that moment. Whereas the other original proposal had people paying for things that there's no connection to them.
But it was the same amount. I feel like it's a recipe and I don't know that they really looked under the hood or looked at it to see how many. I don't know that they care about that. They went to the legislature, the majority of them in support of covering that. So that's where our discussion is about how is this better? How is a new plan better than what we proposed when there's no past service credit other than us buying it? And, or if the legislature suddenly gifts us with money for it, and if anyone's listening, we appreciate it. But the cost is the same, whether or not we're in a new plan or an old plan. I'll stop talking.
Well, the cost being the same is somewhat coincidental. Because you could look at that grid and the initial scenario could have been 6% or 2%. It's somewhat coincidental. The difference, it's really who benefits and who pays. And the proposal from last year was the primary benefiters are the more experience you have, the more you benefit and the less you pay. The least experience you have, the more you pay and the less you Yeah, it's inversely proportionate. That was our board's issue. So of who benefits and who pays. A retirement program, retirement savings program, and goes back to our initial comments about IRS requirements for what a program should be, is about matching who benefits and who pays. It's about members, the members who contribute the most benefit the most, the members that contribute the least benefit the least. And that's what I think is challenging, as coming from Kara's perspective, is that when a group is trying to use a retirement savings program to find a way to benefit one group of people at the cost to another group of people. And that's kind of the challenge. So I go back to the cost part is coincidental. And we're really gonna have two very different things. And we live in a world where we have to live in a box of parameters set by the IRS about what we can do, not just, IRS rules, but our board opinions about intergenerational equity and who benefits and pays. So it's a very different discussion.
I do think that was part of what tripped up in the legislative action commission, right? And that was the issue that, at least in the committee hearings I went to, the issue that I heard the most about from legislators that was kind of why it kept coming back in my hearings, essentially.
So just so I understand, I think I'm getting there. So even though percentages are roughly the same or similar, we are benefiting more, meaning us older folks are benefiting more than the younger folks because we're not paying in as long into the new.
That was the proposal to the legislature last year.
Right. But that's the reason why it got tripped up in the intergenerational inequity came up, is that we're benefiting greatly when we're not paying as much.
That was para board's concern.
Yeah, and inversely, the person who hasn't even started yet. So not even just the current people, but the person who hasn't even started yet is gonna be paying more with that proposal than they should be, or the normal cost of the benefit they're earning.
Correct, which means that they no longer have that 4% of pay to put into deferred comp or whatever they want to do. They lost that opportunity because they're paying for a different group of people.
But I go back to that 4% is gone in this plan too. Because the percentages were the same. I'm so sorry, I jumped right in.
I just wanted to point out one thing, it's the intergenerational inequity piece has never come up when we slash benefits. Where the younger generation is always subsidizing the ones that are close to retirement. We always pay more. The retirement age always goes up. We cut benefits for the deferred augmentation. That's never come up before, but it's coming up now because we're increasing a benefit. Is that the concern?
Well, I would point to that retiree groups in the past have had their post-retirement increase reduced as part of the changes. So when changes were made in 2010, 2013, 2018, period of time, there were changes that were made, both increases in contributions, things that affected actives, but also changes that adversely affected retirees. They had changes to their formula to impact their annual increases.
In 2017, there was the same bill. It only affected one group. It got vetoed, but again, I've never heard this concern about like one group being affected more than the others until it's a benefit increase. I just wanted to flag that because that's been an ongoing concern for my membership, that anytime that we're talking about benefit increases, there was a problem with intergenerational inequities where we have the younger subsidizing the older. That's just the way the plans have been built.
I'd go back to my experience, 2018. was we did a lot of work showing the savings to the plan.
I was there in 18, I worked on the bill too. For 2018, 2017 was one that got vetoed because it only affected one group. But that was also one that we came to the table, agreed on. Most of it was put on the backs of seniors, and then Governor Dayton vetoed it and it went away. And then we moved again. Concern I have is the generational inequity issue has never really come up until it's been a benefit increase, and it's kind of stymieing the conversation, I think, going forward of how we design who benefit or who pays.
I would say in 2017, that wasn't our board's proposals that actually ended up in the bill that was vetoed. So I think if you look at the board position or the board proposals versus what happens in the legislature, they're not always the same. When we did reduce benefits, they did affect all members. And this year, fortunately, we were able to improve benefits, and it actually affected actives and retirees and actives. Also, we'll get the post-retirement increases. So I think we try to look at all the membership and make sure that we're trying to come up with somewhat equitable reduction or improvement. But it's not a perfect science by any stretch, so.
Cool.
Oh, no, sorry, just leaning on my hand here.
Then we'll get to Susan and Joe online.
Okay. And this is an ongoing debate. One of the things I noticed in your graphs related to this intergenerational equity is in some ways I felt that you were actually making the argument the other way, saying that by having this high multiplier at a 2.2, that the younger generation was getting too much money at a 2.2 multiplier by showing that, oh, this was too high for them at this point. And so the intergenerational inequity was actually going too far on this side when we were going at a 2.2 multiplier. And so then we were flipping the script, but then all of a sudden the intergenerational inequity was going way over here for the young people. And so it kind of flip flops. Now, on top of that, I also I know just as everybody else, we always bring this up, but we are that gap here of the fact that there was this piece here that we were also this older piece here where we were in between the rule of 90. And so I don't know how that fits in, that we just kind of fell in that gap, right? I mean, somewhere in there was a piece that somehow we fell in a gap. And so I don't understand how we got the people I started with, they didn't pay any more in than I did. They got to retire at 57, 58, 59. It's just that I missed it by 2 years. But they paid in the same amount as I did. For the same amount of years that I, actually less time than I have. So I understand what you're saying, that there had to be someplace in there, but they didn't pay more than I did. They didn't change something different than I did, but I didn't, somehow there was a gap and something changed. And so that's where it ended.
Well, on the first part, just what we're showing on the grid, we're just trying to be objective with the facts here about what these costs are. And not trying to conclude that it should be one direction or the other. These are just the facts about how this cost would be.
Yeah, I think I would add, when you're talking about that 2.2 multiplier and looking at these income replacement ratios, it's asking the question before we decide what the final multiplier is, what do you need? And if you need more or you need less in your income replacement ratio, that's what that is to determine the appropriate amount that you need. It has nothing to do with who's paying for it or whatnot. It has everything to do with what you need at that point in time and what does that multiplier or this situation get you.
But if you look at your graph, you can see that those people who have been here a long time are going to be way under that graph.
and the people that are gonna be here later are gonna be way above it. So that intergenerational inequity is gonna be the exact flip of what we're talking about.
All right. Susan, online, get your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I'm at home because I'm sick, but I just wanted to ask the question. There was some commentary, I guess, and I don't know who it was talking, and I'm sorry because I can't see in the room there, but about, I think the bill during the 2025 session provided all past service credit, and that's what we should be considering here. And so I'm just trying to understand whether whether Para has valued any kind of plan here that would give everybody credit for all past service as probation or 911. I'm not aware that we did that last session, that we both had it in the bill and had ever costed that out. But, maybe I'm forgetting something here, but I think the comment was made that there was past service credit granted under some earlier version, and that's what we want to do now. And so I just want to make sure that that I'm hearing that correctly, and that we know what the cost would be of granting past service credit across the board for everybody.
You want me to go?
Well, I'd say, Susan, yeah, I think your question was whether Para had costed it out. Para did not cost that out, but the stakeholder groups had that costed out by nature.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And I'm
I'll
not,
see if I can find it.
I'm sorry. And to clarify, I'm not necessarily saying that we're looking at all past credit, but if you put up the plan that we proposed and you put up the plan that is being presented side by side, the costs are the same, and the other one had past service credit.
A bigger benefit.
Yes, and so that was my question is, number one, how is that possible? Maybe we missed something in our plan. But because it's spread out longer, I know that was one of the reasons that it could happen.
That's the primary reason.
Or is there a way we can blend the plans, right? I mean, that's really to make both sides go together. I mean, is that how we negotiate, right? Is there some way to make both sides happy that gets somewhere in the middle?
Let's continue this on. Listener Joe Matthews.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the comment that somebody was suggesting that we haven't discussed intergenerational equity before. We may not have used the same terminology, but I just want to remind people back in 2010, when the omnibus pension bill was passed, we had caps and reductions on retiree COLAs. And that conversation directly came out of a discussion about the fact that as we were going to increase active employee and employer contributions, we needed to make sure that all people participating in the plan could contribute to stabilizing the plans for the long haul to make sure that we all had a retirement that we could rely on. And so, that conversation at that time was very much focused on who has paid into the system, who's receiving benefits. If you go back further to the 90s, and I defer to Para to probably tell the story in more detail, we've had history in the past where the pension plan paid out increased benefits. Employees were receiving larger increases than their active counterparts when they were in retirement. And I think it's just important to remember that overall, what we're trying to do is make a good decision going forward. And I don't know where I've personally landed on this topic. I do think that we need to be mindful that we should not be asking employees that we haven't even hired yet, people that may be hired next year or in the future years, to take on a burden to pay for benefits for other folks that have already retired. I mean, I think that's, for me, I struggle with that. But I just want to know that and share with the group, intergenerational equity has been a topic as long as I've been around the pension conversation in my career.
Person, do you want to reply to that or respond? Jim Mortensen.
What I'm trying to, can you guys hear me okay? I'm working off of headphones here this time.
Yep.
Are we, is it a better plan here if we try to figure out, um, the, the the ingredients in the mix here first? Like, what's the unreduced retirement age going to be? Come to that conclusion. What's the multiplier going to be? What's the post-retirement increase going to be? Get those things nailed down that everybody can agree upon. And this is more for probably Susan and Doug and Aaron, and on recommendations on how to move forward on this. And then if once we get the ingredients of this that everyone agrees upon, and then do we provide the legislature with two options? Here's one, plan that, provides for past service credits. Here's the price tag attached to it. And here's the other plan that doesn't bring the service credits forward. Because no matter what we do here, this is not going to end up exactly the way it goes to the legislature. Because, can we provide them with two options that will bring this discussion up in the committee, and then they can start hashing out on if they have any money to put towards it and what type of tweaks they can make to it. Because we're making the assumption that whatever we agree upon here in this room, that's exactly what they're going to agree upon. Thoughts on that, Susan, Doug, and Aaron?
I cannot agree with you more, Jim. Just, yes.
I think it's good for us as our board then can make a decision to support or not support based on the formula and the components. And then historically, our board isn't opposed to past service. However, the individual that earned it is paying for it. So the plan isn't absorbing it. So like we've had this with our correctional and general plan people switching. So I think they would find it difficult to support a proposal that included future employees paying past service for other people. So I think having the two approaches would be helpful going into the legislature.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment. So back to Nicole, your question. So the cost difference, it is about that time period. And this study is talking about assessing the costs over the current active members that would benefit, which is probably an average of a less than 10-year time frame. The proposal from before, from last session, spread the cost to 2048, 24 years from that point. And I know when we looked at it, that meant half of the cost was going to come from people who are hired in the future. That was concern about the past service.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, so should we start using ingredients, for lack of a better term? Yeah, and get to the ugly part. We decide on what the age is first, or what we.
We can, or we can talk about definitions. I don't know if people want to do an overview from sort of last time and rediscuss our remaining questions that we kind of left for after we got our cost.
Okay, why don't we do that then? That wasn't.
I think there is some easy ones on the agenda that we could agree on pretty easily.
Yep.
And then say it, but if you wanted to get a couple things done, or we can just get on the agenda.
Let's put on the agenda and do that.
I'm guessing we'll get there fairly quick deal. So agenda item number 2, I just sort of wanted to do a summary of sort of high points of my notes from last time and just kind of add on the agenda our questions that we left as sort of these are still out here and we wanted to wait and see sort of this menu from Tara to see if we can answer any of these questions. But just sort of as a summary of where we left off, we had 7 questions, and so I think the ones that we officially answered were, what do employees expect from employers? Really nothing more to discuss there. I think the general thoughts were that they wanted employers to recognize the work that's being done, that there'll be people in the plan that are older, doing stressful jobs. There's a cost savings for getting high earners off of salary. There was wanting parity between corrections and law enforcement, and not to close the door on getting an employer contribution increase. Another question that we sort of already answered and are going to discuss again is, what do employers expect from employees? Those thoughts were wanting a plan that's structurally sound and funded, reasonable contribution rates, intergenerational equity, and a clear reason why certain groups are included in the plan and others are not. Other question that we aren't going to discuss is what's expected or hoped for from the legislature. It was clear legislative language, inclusion of past service, that we don't want people testifying in opposition to any recommendations, and an expectation that requesting an appropriation won't go over well. And then what happens if the legislature is unable to provide any funding? Those thoughts were the goal is not to need state funding, but if there was a funding ask, it would be for a one-time funding for a certain benefit. So that sort of left us with these three kind of questions, which I'll get at sorts of contributions. General thoughts on how much were employees willing to contribute. That those thoughts were what was brought to the legislature, had the employees covering everything. They want a plan that falls between the general plan and the public safety plan, a 60-40 split for employer to employee contributions. There were thoughts that members were willing to pay something for benefit improvements. And then we ultimately ended up wanting to just look at the cost menu from Doug. The questions to the employers were, what were employers willing to pay? Those thoughts were that employers are facing significant cost issues. It's difficult to impossible to pay more than the general plan employer contribution. But there was talk of going back to the members about a 7.5% versus 6.5% employer contribution. And then suggested looking at savings to be had by changing the plan provisions, which gets us to the very last question, which there really wasn't a lot of discussion about. Just a little bit about disability benefits, but we just sort of left it that we needed this cost menu. So I wanted to pose these questions that we sort of left open to the group. If anybody has any more thoughts after seeing Doug's cost menu, or if these questions should just be addressed as part of actually going through all the plan features, but I wanted to address them since we left them open last time and just get the group's thoughts.
Do you have any thoughts on these questions?
Well, Mr. Chair, I would just say that you really captured what my recollection of that discussion. So thank you for kind of getting everything captured in one place.
Yeah, and happy to do it. And I think these are all questions that will have to be answered. Maybe it's just part of, once you decide a different benefit, you can answer, employer contribution questions, if that's sort of the holdup. But I think, yeah, if we don't answer them now, we'll answer them later. So we can.
Ready your definitions. Definition of a probation officer. And Susan, sounds like you have that one.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Just going through here, the document, I guess, that was provided as part of the agenda. We did get proposed definitions or draft definitions from an employee, a stakeholder group, and then employer, and then para. For both the public safety telecommunicator and the 911, the probation officer definitions for a possible inclusion in the new plan. And so Alina and I took those, and also working with Amy at para, and created the definition that's on page 2. And you can see it's intended to be really just slipped right into a new plan. It just states that the members of the plan are public safety telecommunicators as defined in subdivision 2, and probation officers as defined in subdivision 3. They're pretty similar, these definitions, but for the duties involved in each. So in each case, they first have to be a public employee under Para's definition of that. And then they need to be employed by, in the one case, a primary, secondary PSAP or public safety answering point. For probation, it's employed by a probation agency. And then we go into 1, 2, and 3 for each. And 1 is just a description of the duties that they will need to be performing. So that's for each. Telecommunicator has different duties, obviously, than probation, but they're both defined in that small Roman 1. And then small Roman 2 is the same in each. And this definition, or this part of this definition, is actually pulled right out of the para-police and fire plan. They've had some issues where there's been people who primarily do, like, say, probation duties, probation officer duties, but they are assigned to do other duties within, say, the office or whatever. And so they've had some issues trying to figure out, what is that, a police? Is that a fire person for purposes of the police and fire plan? And they came up with this definition, and it has been working pretty well. So we inserted that in here to take into account people who have other jobs, but are primarily probation or telecommunicator. And then the final one, clause 3, is for people who supervise these people. So if they supervise people who are doing the job of a probation officer, then they too are in the plan. And then the final thing here, subdivision 4 requires that the employer certify that this person does satisfy these, this definition for each of these positions. So that was kind of what we were thinking might fit the bill, but obviously this is subject to the, discussion of the group and whatever you all decide. We did provide some questions on page 3 that came up as we were working on this. We don't have to go through those, but they do kind of point to some things that the group might kind of confirm or kind of discuss if there's any issue with any part of the definitions.
Anybody have any questions for Susan or comments on these definitions?
I just know that this is a plan feature. Well, it's not under number 5 on the agenda. It's a plan feature that the session law requires the sport group to determine. So it is something that everybody could come to a consensus on or not come to a consensus on. But as far as definitions, well, it's not in our plan feature agenda item. It is something that folks to weigh in on and say that we can recommend or not recommend.
Does this meet the needs of the dispatchers?
They are, Mr. Chair, they are a public safety.
So the hardest part with this definition is the less than 50% of the time. And what I likened it to when I was speaking to Susan and then a representative from the employers group is a detective in the police department might spend more than 50% of their time writing up reports, reviewing reports. They don't have active supervision or active contact with someone. So are they removed? Do they not qualify for police and fire? Because what happens in our field is we might have someone who is writing reports for 60% of their time, for 2 months. And then the rest of the time they're supervising people for 60%. And so it's hard to figure that out. Is it just a blanket statement and it's a wink, wink, people approve this because there's detectives in the police unit or police plan? Or is it, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Or is it delivery of probation services? Does that count? I mean,
Right.
as long as we're counting that as probation services,
Then it's not an issue.
then it's not an issue because probation
That's
services.
the way I would read it, because that's the same way as the police department.
Then this plan meets our needs.
50% of the time.
And it meets our needs,
This
as long as that
definitely meets
includes
our
all the probation services and we're not getting. And then my other question would be directly supervises, because. And I'm just, I just want to know that we're not gonna get called to the carpet too close to that. Does that mean that's one supervisor up, or does that mean how far up are we going? Because, does it have to be just directly supervised with one probation officer, or is that a director? Okay.
Aaron?
I was just gonna point out, so the MAC and Met Council folks are MSRS, so they wouldn't be in this definition. We're still working with employers on various definitions.
I'll just note that the directly also is in the correctional plan, so we haven't run into issues with the correctional plan. So then we took that language from that, so that's where.
So the correctional plan, a sergeant and a lieutenant would fall. I guess that's the example.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we're good. And I don't,
This,
Okay,
this definition meets our needs.
yep.
all right, so do we have a?
I don't think we need to vote, just if there's just general consensus from the group.
I mean, I've talked with some of my HR people about this, they think that this definition works.
Yes, I believe that it works, and to answer the questions for consideration is to do the job duties of public safety telecommunicators need to include answering emergency telephone calls. And then we don't know about the time question. There are some PSAPs that have part-time employees, but I would imagine they're how that would work, so I need more information on that. And are there any telecommunicators not employed by public safety and not employed by public safety? But I can tell you that there are some telecommunicators who would be assigned other duties outside of a PSAP that would put them below that 50%. So I think that 50% still works, and they would just have to know if they accept that detail, they would be, those credits at that time will be on this plan.
And I would just note too, from the city perspective, I've talked with some HR people and we like the definition of staff.
I just want to note for part-time people, if there are part-time people, they would be in the plan. PNF has to have a resolution, but that's not in here, that's not a requirement. So if they're part-time, they're in the new plan.
Anybody online that has heard? Right. Lawyer, did you?
Yeah, if I could, my apologies for not being there in person. Kind of tough to be a proxy and then not show up for the meeting, so I apologize for that. So when we talk about the definition, I just want to be clear. For example, with the state patrol employees, we have direct line 911 telecommunicators. We have a level of supervisors that manage them directly. We have site managers, and then in my case, then I would be technically the director over all of those individuals. So when we talk about going up, how far do we go up? I recognize this probably isn't going to have a huge impact on my career. I'm looking at the end of it here, not in the too distant future. But for the future and those people that are coming behind me, at what point do we then? Is everybody encompassed in that, or are we limiting that based on this definition? I guess is where I'm going.
This definition is for PERA folks only, so city counties. So if you're state, we're gonna have a separate definition. We've been circulating it to DOC and DPS, and I haven't heard back from everyone and made. We will be a little bit more prescriptive and have the job classification included, just because that's what we're used to with our other plans. It's not Susan's favorite approach, but then it's very clear how far it goes up. I think the initial definition just has the frontline folks and then the direct supervisor, not anyone that would be, so like MMA be included, but managerial would not. If that helps explain.
Very much so. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So I need to clarify. So you're saying that Tim and his managers wouldn't be included?
In managerial plan, correct? Yes, they wouldn't be.
Managerial, but we're talking about this plan, so I'm confused. Why-
Okay, so the state has the unions, so you have MAPE employees and you have middle management associations, so the supervisors over the MAPE employees often are in middle management. And then there's the managerial plan folks that are not represented in the union. They wouldn't be covered by the plan, it would just be the MAPE in it.
Can I add to that? So the frontline folks for the state that work for the DPS under the state patrol, they are AFSCME employees. The direct level supervisors are MMA, as are the manager positions. It was just recently, within the past 8 months, that this position that I hold, the director, was moved out of MMA and moved to a managerial plan. And that was solely to allow my position to be at the table during collective bargaining. So prior to 8 months ago, my position as the director over 3 PSAPs was an MMA position. So I think there needs to be some clarification there to make sure that we're all talking about the same pieces and parts as we go forward.
Well, once I get feedback from DPS, I will clarify that.
Sure.
Okay,
That's
Jim
fair.
Martinson, you'll be up next to Devin or after Devin.
Just to clarify a little bit even further, the names are misnomers. Like managerial plan is not necessarily managers, they're just non-represented employees of different groups, typically higher level political appointees. Same with commissioners plan, they aren't all of the commissioners. It's just a different type of salary and benefits plan structure under the state 43A.
Jim Martinson,
Well, just for clarification, LLS represents the State Patrol dispatchers currently. So, and I know there's potentially going to be a difference in this, but the scenario that we brought up on who should be included in the plan that Dar and I presented, I know there might be some differences between the state employees, depending on what particular contract or plan they're in, such as a managerial plan. But I don't know if that would have anything to do with their pension plan. And Darlene could probably chime in here a little bit more than me too, but if you're working in the dispatch center and you're a supervisor in there or a dispatch manager in there, those folks definitely have to be part of this plan because they're actually working in the center. They're going many times, and if someone needs to take a break, they'll go in and fill in for them. But those folks, how we did that description of who should be included in this plan was pretty spot on and pretty all-inclusive of those that should be part of this plan.
Aaron,
So the classifications that I included were the classifications that were provided to the actuary for the analysis. So I believe it is the classifications that you all told us to provide. I'm sorry if I misstated and confused things by adding the union affiliations or the the managerial plan, but whatever classification that you asked us to provide to the actuaries is what is included in our proposed definition.
I don't know about MMR, SRS. But, and Doug and I had this conversation via email. The email just went out to the HRs and said, give us your numbers, your people, your ages of telecommunicators. Many of them did not include the managers because they weren't given specific enough information. They just used the word telecommunicator. So we didn't get to have an input in that, with the exception of that when I spoke to Doug, he said, go back and tell them to include them. We want all the names we can and the numbers to make a decision. We'll make the decision later, and that decision is by the legislature and this group. So I do think we have to make sure we are getting what we want here on paper, because as was stated that, myself and a PSAP, I came up through the ranks, started at the wee bottom through the years, but today I can still answer a phone. I still do all of that work. I do the SWAT call outs. I do all of that kind of stuff. I testify in courts on behalf of all of my people and validate the audio and, you know, have all that knowledge of the front line. So, but I just want to make sure that the HRs are going to be the ones certifying. You know, in my job description, it says I supervise all telecommunicators, all supervisors of the PSAP. I supervise. So is that enough? So we just need to make sure, because Jim is absolutely correct. That's our intent. Once you're outside those PSAP walls, you know, doing IT or different things, that's a different story. Everybody in the PSAP should be.
Tim?
Yeah.
Online? Tim Boyer?
My apologies, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just, first of all, wanted to apologize to Jim. My 30+ years, it's primarily been AFSCME employees and was relatively recently that LELS came on board. So my apologies for that. I misspoke there. But I would echo what Dar is presenting to the group. You know, just because there is a title associated with the individual and the belief that we've got all of these other things to do, we're still very intimately involved in the day-to-day operations of what's taking place inside the PSAP. So I think in the spirit of the language, I think we need to make sure that we consider that as we develop the parameters of this and the definitions. Thank you.
Well, I think what we can do is, seeing as how most of this conversation is surrounding the MSRS plan, can you wait until the next meeting for the definitions specific to MSRS until you come up with the information you need?
So I see them as two separate items because PRA is gonna have their own plan and they're gonna have their definitions that work for them. So if you all have consensus around their definitions, that's great. I think we can bring our definitions at the next meeting and get feedback, and once I get the information back from the couple people I'm waiting on.
Perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So specific to PERA, are we okay with the definitions?
Yeah.
As long as the employers think that their HRs would read this to what I just did.
Yes, that's my understanding. Yes.
Right. On that. Moving right along. All right, so then we're gonna skip over number 4, or I'm sorry, number 5. Or no, I'm sorry, number 4. Susan, we're gonna go to number 5. Do you wanna discuss the list of plan features and LCR staff discussions?
Yeah, thank you again, Scott. It's always risky to do something like this, but I feel that LCPR staff is going to have to draft 2 new plans, 1 sub-plan, 1 new plan, and have that done before the start of session, really even before then. And so we are going to need decisions really on all of these items that are listed in this memo. Hopefully sometime, say early November, so we can spend about a month drafting this up, because the plan would be that we draft bills, circulate them to all of you, and then you all could review them and then hopefully provide us with feedback, changes, comments, concerns, whatever. So what I've done here is really just floated suggestions. Okay, so this is based on what I know we need to have in a new plan. And I'm just throwing things out here with the understanding that you all will have a different point of view on a lot of these and we'll put in something different. So if age 62 is not going to be right, let's go with age 60, whatever you all would like to do on this. But I also want to note that we can do a couple alternative bills or 3 alternative bills. So if, for instance, there are people who are concerned about the cost and want to do something that is, say, a little less expensive, age 62, lower COLA, lower, multiplier, we could run a bill that does all that. Then we could do something that is sort of everything everybody could ever want in a new plan, run that one, and then maybe even some kind of middle ground. Ultimately, the commission, of course, the legislature will make the call. They'll decide. But it might be a good idea for us to think in terms of, what do we want to do by way of presenting alternatives? It's likely we won't all settle in on one, set of features. But it's perfectly fine to do more than one bill. One, sort of proposal here. So, to that end, I'm hoping that we can kind of go through these features, come to some sort of maybe consensus on some of these, or if we can't, what are the alternatives? And then tell staff, draft our bills. That's where we need to get, I guess, really as quickly as we can. So, just really starting here. I don't need to lead this discussion. You can all see what the first one is. Do we have a sub plan for MSRS and a new plan for para? That's clearly what both para and MSRS want. I'm thinking that's okay with everybody, but Scott, I guess if I could turn it over to you to maybe just work through these features. If there's any explanation needed, I can provide that, Alina or Doug or Aaron.
Do that. So question number 1. Are we okay with a standalone plan with para and a sub plan with MSRS?
That's how we've been proceeding, I believe.
Okay.
Sound good from public player side.
So I have a question. Could I jump in there?
Yes, Tammy Jo.
So one of the things is just as we have been, and I'll just say I was a little taken aback by this memo because we had just been at presentation stage, right? I didn't know we were at the negotiation stage until right now. I thought we were just getting into that. And so I didn't know we were behind the ball, I guess is where I felt. Can I, as we're jumping into this, can I make a proposal that maybe, and maybe we'll get further than I expect today, but we're halfway through today. My understanding is that we got a lot to cover here yet. Maybe part of today might be, could we have a work session in the next 2 weeks to really dig into some of these numbers as a smaller group, or as some of these ideas or proposals, maybe to just spitball things in my head because I'm a professor. My idea is I just want a whiteboard and say, okay, here we go. This is this idea. This is this idea. These are things that we could kind of throw at the wall and kind of come up with ideas and options. Like I said, we have all of these different things that we kind of need to place together and see what would work. Is that something we can do as a smaller group or as a big group, or have a longer than a 2-hour meeting every 2 weeks? To get to November 1st? Is that a
So
possibility?
I would ask you that who would you propose to be in this?
Well, I would say whoever wanted to, but I would like to do that, but maybe that's not an option. And I did bring this up actually to Matt Hilgard, one of the employer people, and he had agreed that he didn't know we were at that point either. And I don't know if other people would be interested in that. Maybe they are. It's just something I would.
And so you're talking about just like what the benefit potentially looks like a subgroup to where are we prioritizing this versus that type of thing?
And is there other options? Can we come up with creative options that we could all agree on?
I don't see there being a problem.
Or maybe other people don't think that's necessary. I don't know. What does other people think?
I mean, I'm just gonna speak for myself, but like, I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to anything like that, I wouldn't imagine that like. I talked with Eric and Mike a little bit about this on Monday, actually, I want to anticipate that like, as Mike will be with me saying, here's exactly what the benefit should look like. But we'd like to be in the room just to hear the conversation and also just, I mean, because when it comes to like ultimately what the benefit looks like, I mean, we care that it's stable, but not as, but we would want to just be in the room to understand kind of where things are and why they are the way they are, if that makes sense.
Well, I wonder, are we just better off trying to plan a longer and have everybody in the group start drawing this stuff out versus having a subgroup meeting?
And maybe that's what it is.
And would that, my question on that, just, would that be a waste of time when you guys put all that work in? And the rest of the group says, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. I don't know if that would.
And maybe we'll get through more today. I just was throwing it out there.
And if, Mr. Chair, if I could just in defense of Susan, I think that it's really helpful to have something to look at so that we can start moving the dial on any given provision from that position. So, I mean, while, we didn't direct that work as co-chairs, I think it's helpful. And I know that Susan, in her role as the executive director, has a responsibility to keep us moving forward. And I think this was her good faith effort at doing that. So I don't think this is setting us off in any direction or setting the stage for the negotiations. I think it's just something where she's laying out the parameters of the issues that ultimately we need to address and giving us a starting point.
Well, it does, it gives us some specific spaces, right? And like I said, I think there's some things in here we can all agree on pretty quickly.
Sure.
But there's other things, I think that we could have longer discussions about and maybe be creative.
Well, I think that gets into this kind of put the ingredients together, right? And so I personally like this for no other reason than this is the ideas. They're out there and then we can choose.
And maybe it is just scheduling a longer meeting.
Yeah.
So maybe you're right.
So why don't we?
Just get into it.
Yep, get into it, continue on where we're at. And then, if there's point number 5, that's an issue. We schedule that for a longer meeting or if it's gonna be a longer meeting. Okay. I think the more I think about it, this group is the right group for it.
Yeah, this was just Paula Graff saying to do an MSRS sub-plan. And then she said it may be a different conversation for the MSRS folks, knowing that the groups on the state side are so small and that a new plan is not a viable.
Okay. All right, so we understand there's gonna be a sub-plan and a new plan for para. Eligibility, MSRS sub-plan, that we're gonna wait until next week, is that correct?
Yeah, so I think the
Yeah.
eligibility one, we'll do that definition next time. Prepare a new plan, that's the
Yeah.
definition that you guys just talked about.
Let's go to number 3, please. Employee and employer contribution, SRS sub-plan. Current job. Yes, this is a big one that we're gonna. Aaron, where do you guys stand on this bullet point?
So we don't have a position on the contribution rate or who pays. I think that if I recall correctly, our last one of our meetings, the employer sounded like they weren't open to paying extra, but that's really an employer question. So what we'll do is we'll come up with the total cost of whatever is decided, and then the breakdown of pays will be determined somewhere. I don't know if it's here in the legislature.
This one, item 3 is probably better, just moved way down to the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, the calculation of costs is something that depends on what all the other things are. I think I included this here just because I was hearing that employers are saying, we can't pay more. And then, so the thing that's the variable is what will the employee contribution rate be? And that really depends on all the other stuff in this memo, so.
All All right, so let's move 3 down towards the bottom. Move on to 4, please. Vesting requirements, 3 years on each of them. Discussion.
What is cliff vesting?
It's
I'm not understanding what cliff.
That
vesting-
means that at 3 years, someone becomes 100%
Okay,
vested, and opposed to cliff is a terminology, because otherwise it's. There's some that kind of go a tiered vesting, like you're 20% vested, 40%, 60%. This is just means it all happens 100%.
and past service in the other plan would include automatic vesting in the new plan.
All of your service would count for vesting, regardless of which plan.
And then, and I know I asked this before, I'm just verifying. But, like the fire and the police, they have a 5-year and then a 10-year. But you have said that that does not change the cost for our plans. Like, if we went through a similar concept of saying that you needed a 5-year for 50% and a 10-year vesting, that it would not reduce our cost.
I may have said it's not very significant. It's a couple of years ago, there was a change from 5-year vesting to 3-year vesting in each of our general plans. And I don't even know what the number was. It was really quite small.
I think it depends on the plan. So we absorbed the cost to switch from 5 to 3 a couple years ago, and then, but we did not change our correctional plan because it was a more significant cost, which is that green investing that you described. I would say with MSRS, because it's a sub-plan, they're already in 3-year vesting, and so we'd want to keep it consistent. So that would be our perspective. And I think there are a lot of short-term employees in this, so you know, 10-year maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important point that the rate of turnover influences the vesting, because the employer contributions for the members that leave before becoming vested stay in the plan and go to the people that become vested.
So wouldn't that make it more advantageous to increase the vesting period?
But it's the plan.
Because I remember that, it was probably 2 meetings ago, you said that very same thing.
Yeah, so from a member perspective, you want shorter vesting. From a cost perspective, there's to put it pretty bluntly, there's more subsidizing going on the higher the vesting. For the people that leave, the employer contributions that go to the members, for the people that leave, are used to for those that stay. The employees can always take their employee contributions with interest.
So I'm okay with it.
And this would have to be, if you do look at something later, I mean, I think a 3-year would be.
Yeah, and that's what matches the general plan, right? When the correctional plan was first started, that was also a 3-year vesting. To be clear, when you vest, it just means you get your years of service, your multiplier, and your high five, right? Like, you're getting in what you're paying out. So just,
Okay.
there's not
my only reason I'm asking is brings the cost down for us. It might be a way to bring the cost down.
And look better.
Right. Or does it look better? Because to your point too, is I do think one of the legislators also asked about that when we were talking about our plan before. But if it doesn't affect us in any way, we would agree to that. I just wanted to be clear that make sure that the 3-year vesting doesn't change anything.
Cause I look at 3 years and I think, well, that's not very many become vested.
Yeah.
So I kind of, it's pretty standard.
Paula Grass says 3-year vesting.
So the vesting period is moved a couple of times over history. Is there a rationale or a philosophy as to why it changed last time?
It was so the legislature at that time had a small amount of money that they had a target that they could contribute to the plans. And it was low cost benefit improvement. So that's one of the selected choices.
It's probably also a move closer to private private plan practice is typically shorter vesting. I don't know if that was a relevant thing. It's just.
Certainly, I mean, the movement on any vesting is coming down, not going up. That's the trend. In the last 20 years.
In recent years, as they mentioned, any more years ago, it was, the police and fire went the other way to make it a longer period to vest.
30, 40 years ago, there were 10-year vesting, for some workers.
Stuck around that.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're okay with 3.
Here's okay with it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
The benefit formula, is this another one that's gonna drop down towards the bottom or? Go ahead.
Talking to Jim, he left for a second and then came back. We've talked about this, Steve, that's why we agreed to come back, but the turnover rate is very high. 911 and in corrections. And I think, the higher vesting and that tiered thing that the corrections have, that's kind of why they put it in there. We're trying to retain people. And if they're going to leave and the people who are left, it's kind of goes to probation and parole that you're saying that how do we pay for that? So I personally don't object to either a 5-year or some sort of tiered thing. Because we're struggling to keep these employees and them trying to pay for the ones who stay because, and that lower age, because that's what got us here. They struggle to work, as they get into their 50s and approach 60. And then a lot of training and retraining these people, because it takes a year to train a telecommunicator, is also done by these seasoned employees who don't just come in and do their jobs. They have to keep training and keep their jobs and train again and train again, and train again. So I actually don't have an objection, and I think the employer should really look at that as well, because that's our struggle.
I would say that when it comes to the vesting, just looking at it, it's not a strong feeling one way or the other. I think it does make some logistical sense to have it be a higher, to have it be that 5-year, just for those exact reasons like you're saying. It does, especially in the early years of the plan, it would make it a bit more financially sound, but it just was I would say from the city perspective, we don't feel strongly that if the group is kind of going around 3 years. I just think it's more of a logistical, probably to exactly what you're saying. It makes some sense to have it be higher, to have more recruitment for that plan, have more subsidizing to Doug's point. And so, yes, I agree with that, but it's not something that Nathan and I were thinking about pounding the table on necessarily.
I would just throw my weight behind 3 years for vesting. For us, it's also transition between MSRS and Para. We have a lot of those, particularly the jurisdictions transitioning from DOC to MACAC counties. And so we're seeing a lot of employees. So having that remain steady at 3 years, particularly for our folks who are currently vested in the plan at 3 years, for those new recruits, going to 5 years makes no sense.
Jim Martinson.
Yeah, with a lot of these positions, with corrections and dispatch, and many of the folks that we represent, a lot of these agencies are doing both jobs. They're doing corrections and they're doing dispatching, or it's separated out. A majority of the time, they're in the exact same contract. So to keep things as consistently as possible when it comes to vesting would be, in my opinion, a good idea.
So Jim, to clarify, you mean the tiered one, matching corrections, not 3.
Correct.
And what is the tiered correction to that?
10-year, so it's agreed in 10.
Sorry,
Great intent, save us the enough.
Because he's correct, like, for, Washington County, for a long time, they did just recently separate out into two contracts. Correctional officers and telecommunicators were in the exact same department. And they are in that in many other areas for those corrections folks do telecommunicator work. And in that case, they are in the corrections plan.
So could I just play devil's advocate a little bit? So if I'm a new employee and I know I'm gonna take this job and it's a potentially stressful job, I'm more inclined to accept a job where I know I get a pension after 3 years and then stick around if I'm enjoying the job. But if I know I'm gonna have to work 10 years to potentially get a full pension, I'm gonna be less inclined to accept that position. So I don't know if that's just the mindset of different generation but I mean, when I hire new folks, even with the type of work we do, it's like, oh, in 3 years I can get a pension. And then if they make it to that point, they usually stay. So I just throw that out there because sometimes I mean, that sounds very daunting, 10 years to doing any one thing when you're initially starting and you don't know what to expect.
Yes, I don't disagree with you, Aaron. This is where it gets, which way to go. But then how do they sell it to law enforcement and fire and correctional officers?
I would argue that we don't see the turnover as dispatchers. I know for.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Dave.
just a little background on the vesting time on the pension for corrections. When we started that, the goal there was to build the pension fast, and with the turnover rate of guys leaving from corrections to become police officers, keep the employer money in the pension. So that was the main focus of that tool at that time, and why there's that longer vesting. I guess I never really thought about myself 3 years versus 10 years to get vested, because 3 years at the time 1.9, and okay, I walk away at the end of 3 years and I got 1.9 times my high five of that first 3 years sitting there. That's not really a big benefit. But the money staying behind from people that move on, that's huge for the health of the pension.
Is it possible to have two different vestings in this plan? One for us and one for them? I'm sorry, dispatchers, telecommunicators, I'm just pointing.
Well, that's probably, probably not. That's a question we would take back to our IRS outside tax lawyers.
I guess for me, we'd have to weigh out what the gains would be, right? How much, can we predict, looking at the turnover rate right now, what that would look like, say 10 years from now? Can we figure that out and see if it's worth it? But the only thing that worries me, a couple things that worry me. One is, look, in some of these industries, we're having a hell of a hard time attracting people. Having somebody know that they've got something, a little nest egg, whether it's 1.9% or whatever it is, after 3 years, would attract somebody versus the 5 year. The other thing is that people in the plan now, we'd have to grandfather them at minimum, because you started your job with a 3-year vesting plan. You can't just move the goalpost. So.
And like with a higher vesting, people in the plan right now are likely gonna vest anyways if you have a higher vesting because they have the service.
I just think we have to look at the weigh out the positives. What does that look like? And I don't know whether we have to.
Cool. This speaks to what you're saying and to what Devin brought up. The counties that are transitioning from DOC to community corrections right now are going from MSRS to para. And so if we suddenly have a longer vesting or a change in it, it's going to tank all these things that are happening legislatively, and county boards have already voted on these transitions. It's going to be a mess unless they're automatically grandfathered in under the same vesting.
There's current state statute requires the employer to pay the same benefit rates for any employee from TSC transferring. So
Exactly.
you'd have a different rate, so matching it to 3 is probably, or at least having them matched, ideal.
Darlene, your members right now are 3-year. Hey, look to the group to side this out. I do understand your concerns, but it sounds to me, especially since it would not be a change. But just keep you guys live at 3 years.
Jim?
Jim, you guys live at 3 years?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So currently, right now, your members are vested at 3 years. The majority of this group on the employee side, and I don't want to speak for the employers, but it sounds to me like majority of the group wants a 3-year vest. Can your side of the aisle live with 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the pros and cons of it is, I mean, most employees, new employees have no idea what their retirement plan is. My own opinion, I mean, I'd never want to submarine any of this on this issue, but keeping the money, like Dave said, in the plan is way more important than attracting somebody on a 3-year investment. If they're either going to come and do this job for retirement, and go and do it into retirement, or they're not. If they walk away with their retirement after 3 years, it doesn't help the health of the pension. And maybe Doug or Aaron can expound on that a little bit more and their thoughts on it too. But it's not like we can't live with 3%, but I think if we're looking at the health of this pension, we're better off doing the tiered one.
Like you have a comment on that?
I don't have an opinion. I mean, I struggle with the inconsistency between the plan. I struggle with that a little bit. I would only add that any kind of cost thing, this is an actuary question. They'd have to run. I couldn't guess at it.
And I would just say that regardless of the vesting period, if a person leaves and doesn't collect a pension, it takes a refund of their contributions to plan benefits. So in human behavior is human behavior, and often, even if they're vested, they still take a refund of their contributions. So I look at this as more of a recruiting kind of approach, in that a shorter period will be more incentive for someone to be like, oh yeah, I can do 3 years and get a pension. They still might take a refund of their contributions, which still benefit the plan. So that I just
Do you know what percentage do that today? Do you have those numbers?
we do, I just don't have it with me. I mean, we have a turnover number that we look at our experience every 4 years. See what that is.
We didn't know who we were in the plan yet, so I know you don't have turnover numbers for my folks. But what percentage of employees that have 5 years or less take a refund?
We may have data that we could go back and look.
I did look at our data. I don't have it with me, but because we have the job classifications, we could pull data. So I have how many people have refunded. And I would have their service too, the service credit that they've accrued, but it doesn't necessarily account for other CSA type plans.
There, and Jim can weigh in. You give a valid point here. So, and I think with that and with what Jim said too, we don't want to hang our hat on anything that's gonna sink this. And if there's that going on there with 3, and we want to match MSRs with 3 with our folks that are in para and your folks that are in there, and that's what they have today, I'm leaning toward that. And I just look to Jim to weigh in.
Do you have any other comments, Jim?
No, I pretty much said it, not that we can't do the 3%, I just, the health of the plan, in my opinion, will be better with the other one, but if that's the, if that's the overall recommendation of the group, then that's what we go with.
All right, I think 3 years is over. Moving right along. Oh, the benefit formula. So that was the next question. Is that something that we'd be better off? Is that that's a big.
Can I just make a comment? And this goes for like benefit formula, retirement age, you know, and a number of these, like it's from an employer perspective, a lot of the time it's going to depend on how it's being paid for, right? I mean, that's kind of the crux of the issue from our perspective. So I don't know how you want to like talk about these things when we haven't. I understand like why you want to figure out what the benefit looks like before you figure out how much you'd be willing to pay, but like that's kind of just so you know, kind of where I'm coming from on this. It's just that's part of the issue. So I do think like at the last meeting, Logan mentioned, I think it's kind of included in these assumptions somewhere. It's like 7.5% general plan rate, which is current policy. It's not current law, right? And I think that we're generally comfortable with that. It's not a lot of our members' first choice, right? But it's something that I think we can get agreement on. But just wanted to give you all that like caveat in these discussions from our perspective.
Yeah. This is a chance for me. I want to go back to Tammy Jo. You asked a question earlier that I wasn't understanding well enough to answer. And I think if I understand before you were saying it, the legislative proposal before was an ask for unreduced F60 pass service, but there's no change to the multiplier. It's to 1.7%, and you're saying now we're showing multipliers that go up to 2.2. You know, why are we? Honestly, like why? I want to ask you, why are we doing that? And part of that is in addition to what the proposal was last year, there was questions years ago about going to the correctional plan, which had 2.2. The multipliers, we wanted to show that. The MSR's general plan has gone to 1.9 for the multiplier. I just wanted to explain like why we were showing those different multipliers. That's one of the reasons to show it, because they were brought up. But I'd also want to point out that if it's an earlier retirement age, we'd have a question about, is the 1.7% multiplier enough to give a reasonable retirement at that age? Do you have to raise the multiplier for that reason too? Anyway, that's. I didn't understand the question before to answer before, like why we were showing these different options, but I wanted to clarify that now just so you kind of know why they're there.
The ones that you presented though, those are based on 60, right? On the percentages and the.
Yeah. Those are all based on.
At 60, okay.
So we're having these discussions and I'm sitting here thinking about this today. I feel like we need to answer the question. It's a two-part question. Not really, it's the money. We gotta figure out the percentages where we go, because that's gonna dictate, in my opinion, what I'm hearing from everybody is kind of where it's coming down to. And we can sit there and answer all these other questions, but if we get down to the bottom, then the money, leave the money for class. It just seems to me like it's foolhardy. We just wasted time if we can't agree to the money. Am I misunderstanding and reading the room, or somebody else have an opinion on it?
I was just gonna say, we can check out the easy one, because number 7, I'm pretty guessing we can even just all say, oh, number 7, we can all agree on, and we can just make it off, right? And then we go to the hard ones.
Yeah, but I think the number one hard one is money.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's, and I'm, Tammy Jo, beautiful, let's,
Well, Mr. Chair, I know it's the hard question. I'm gonna come right out and say that I'm thinking that my folks are not willing to pay more than an additional 2%. I think they know, for a lower retirement age, going to cost them. You know, and then I look to, other conversations that we've had, you know, that people at higher incomes aren't living paycheck to paycheck. We have our new employees who do, they count on those paychecks. We can't take everything away from them. So I see very small number, and it still could be significant though. But where I'm sitting right now is 2%. And that's where I was looking at this table and then looking at then the matching multiplier and cost of a CPI of where that would fall. That's just where I'm at, and I'm not willing to budge on 60. I can definitely budge early retirement at 55 instead of 50, but I am not willing to budge on normal retirement at 60. And 2% kind of where I'm sitting.
can we, I appreciate you, can put the marker up. Can we look at the percent of the duty to? Can everybody agree that it's concept?
No, we kind of did last week.
Yep.
Or last meeting, so that's fine.
Perfect. 7 is done. All right. Start talking. So you guys are, you're saying 2% above.
That's where I'm comfortable advocating and selling to my state.
60. I wonder if we should pull up Doug's numbers. I'm sorry, that's late. On the agenda, we're
on the mail.
I think we're reverting back to number 2. Is that,
I think we're generally taking a step back. We're just gonna talk money. And the idea is that if we talk money, that might shape how to answer some of these
the
other
rest of
questions.
To finish number 5. Could be in number 5.
This one, yes, I'm here.
I'm like, on the memo?
No, no,
it?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I apologize to revert to a previous issue. I've just gotten a couple emails. I think just one of the people I've talked to on the definition had misread an and/or issue in the definition for para, so I apologize for misrepresenting that, but I'm just gonna need to spend more time looking at it because we've misread an or as an and, getting me my 16 tax bill flashback. But if I can just so I apologize for that. I just wanted to take.
The definition of the way your request is still open.
Yeah, just because there was a misread on an and an or that makes a substantive difference, so my apologies.
You can come back to us at the next meeting.
Yes.
Both definitions or just one?
Oh, I'm just talking about the probation definition. I'm sorry.
All right.
I don't know if it makes a difference for telecommunicators.
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Regardless of where we get to today, I would ask that everybody looks at Susan's memo and start asking very hard questions, try to come up with your answers specific to that memo or your next idea. So we don't have to, I understand Nathan, but just go forward and then we take a step back.
Yeah, no, that's why I like hesitate bringing it up when I'm not totally positive on it yet, but what I don't want to do is miscommunicate further. So
We want to get everybody's.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Chair.
And Scott, I just have one question. I think Dar was speaking. Was what Dar said is that Dar, the folks that you're representing do not want to pay more than 2% additional employee contribution? Is that what you said?
That's my read from them, yes.
So that drives a whole bunch of things then, as far as the more substantive provisions. So yeah, thanks. I just wasn't sure that I heard that, so thank you.
That was gonna be my question too, because I didn't know if Dar was referencing the benefit multiplier. Because the not more than 2% puts us pretty far down. But also that the probation group isn't, we've just seen these, and it was after we met.
Understood.
We would like to delay any decisions on that until our next meeting.
Okay, yep, and I'm not looking for a decision necessarily. Can you get numbers altered, and you're saying where we said, they can't come back to this meeting. So I think we know where, Dar's group is at, and the group that has. Go ahead.
Do we have a different view?
Yeah, I know you do have a different view. I'm just saying, are you willing to put it out there to where you guys
We don't have a different view, I would guess.
what's that?
I would guess we will have a different view. I don't know what that number would be,
Just right now, okay,
but
that's fair.
if that's, I mean, just from the fact that we had a different view going into the session, you could say that we know we have a different view on that. We were willing to support, you know, a lot of different funding on that. So that may mean that where our differences kind of align. We were pretty determined to make this happen at a different level. So I just don't know what that number is.
Is it asking too much? Back to the next.
Too much.
Yeah, we'll have to do some homework, because I think the 2% is a low number. I mean, we were told last year our number was still too high, and so I think we have to, you know, we might spend some time between now and that next meeting then, if that's the ask, reaching out to some of these other groups to get a better understanding. Like, I don't know if a 2% increase and no employee increase could even get us to age 60. And so I think those are some of the things that, you know, for us, it's hard to put out. I'm seeing a no from the other side of the table. I think it's hard for us to throw out a number, and I know this is really trying for the plans and for the counties. It's hard for us to throw out a number when we haven't yet been able to wrap our head around. And I know you guys do a really good job putting together these charts, but we don't always speak the language. But it's hard to wrap our head around. If we said 4%, if we said 10%, if we said 2%, what can we get? If we're getting 2%, we can't get to age 60. I don't know how we come up with a perfect number for fall. So I think that's something we're grappling.
But one of the things that I was really wanted to like say that was very beneficial, that will be super helpful for us, that Susan added to her memo, which was very difficult for us in this last session, because we have so many gap people. She did include in the memo that there would be potentially the option for a one-time option for an opt-out. And with that, it could be a lot easier for us.
We are in support of that.
Amy,
So we talked to Ice Miller about that, and we're awaiting a final memo, but there has to be conditions for current members to have an election opportunity. The employee contribution has to remain the same pre-tax in order to have that happen. So you could have it where your pre-tax contribution remains the same, but the post-tax, which gets really complicated, is higher, and you'd be able to have an election for current members. If that's not met, though, we cannot have an election, because we can't offer you another opportunity to elect. It's a one-time election at first eligibility. We're awaiting a further detailed memo.
here to have dug ourselves a hole here, so. Is there anything else on this? That we think we-
Well, were you talking to me, Scott?
I was just wondering if there's anything else in your memo that you feel that we could knock off.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several others here that are pretty straightforward. I mean, I'm guessing surviving spouse and dependent coverage is not gonna be a controversial item. You know, so I'm going way down to the end here, like number 12. You know, anything we can decide, well, and we're not deciding, but anything that we can sort of not have a lot of objection to will mean that we could start drafting. So yeah, if we could do surviving spouse refund of contributions, that'd be great.
All right, does anybody have any, we use the same as a MSRS sub plan and general plan? It's good,
Yes.
good. All right, got that one done.
Refund of contributions.
Keep that the same. I'm assuming that's what we've all been kind of talking about. Good with that. All right, that one's.
And
Okay.
everything else is probably gonna be controversial or requiring some calculations, and so, yeah, that's good. Thank you, Scott.
All right, thank you, Susan. So I think.
Sorry, you're making great progress.
I was.
Did we discuss and did we decide that number 6 is age 60?
Sorry. Guess we did not discuss that, or, yeah, we stopped right there, so.
The reason, I'm sorry, and
Please.
Susan, please speak to this if I'm saying it wrong, but the reason Susan put age 62 in is the IRS requirement. And we have since learned that there is a decision coming forward, a legal opinion that says that we are okay on that to go below that. That is the only reason 62 was in her memo.
Right.
I can talk about that. This is happy news for you guys.
Yeah.
The safe harbor laws are really there for like purposes of in-service distributions and stuff like that. So you can have an age requirement of 60. It may impact in-service distributions, it may not, but we're not considering in-service distributions. We're good.
Yeah.
So,
The only thing I would add, though, is if we're talking about, DAR's limit on employee contributions, there might have to be a little bit of a change to the normal retirement age to pay for that. So, yeah, I mean, I would guess that's still an open issue depending on what the cost of, age 60 is. With all the other things that we've got going here.
So everybody in the room here is stuck on 60 or
Correct.
60. All right, well, hopefully we can all have our cake and eat it too, but we shall see. So, we agree to 60?
Yes.
Yes.
So I asked our actuary to prepare numbers based on Susan's request. I did it at 62. So I might have to change some things, but that's already costing us money to do that. So maybe we'll leave it at 62 and you can see the differences. That would save money to go to 62. I know you want to retire at 60. I don't doubt that. You can still retire early with reduction, which wouldn't be as bad as your reduction from 66, but just throw that out there because I might be too late to switch it. So
We've had dueling studies before of the same provisions and comparable costs, so maybe we can be we can find use for that to see the impact.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand why 62 is in there. I guess I'm a little frustrated that we keep seeing the numbers that we're not actually talking about this entire time. I know 60 is been on the table, the teachers got 60. I have never been other than 60, aside from when we had 35. So I understand you could do an actual study on 60. That saves time. We're not looking at 62, but I understand why she want to actually any money. Even though it's on MSR some time, I would just focus on here. Because it gets frustrating, we're still not different number when we're talking about 60 start.
So that was, I started at 60 and then it was requested to switch it. So it wasn't intended to be against any of you or your wishes. It was just requests made and sequence back. Trying to please everyone is really
We appreciate you.
All right, so for next week, you'll try to get it switched to 60 if it's not complete. We'll do that, but we gotta decide the money next week. We gotta decide here. I would ask that everybody present their best wishes, but understand that probably. So, anybody have any closing comments?
Comment you said next week. Is there?
Or next meeting?
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah.
There was some discussion about maybe blocking out a longer period of time. Is that something we want to discuss?
So we have, this is one more meeting before.
Next meeting is
13th.
October 20th at 1 p.m. Exact day. About 2 weeks from today.
Right.
Day instead of basically a week. There's a lot of time in between meetings before to try to put stuff together. So it's 2 weeks from, about 2 weeks from now. I'm sure we can try to resume a little longer. But I need to know if that works for everyone's timing or if we should start it earlier.
We did 12:30 to 3:30 or 12 to 4.
May not take 4 hours, but there if we need.
I mean, the other option is to have a meeting every week, and I don't think everybody's ready to just do that right now unless.
I would support starting earlier, but
So we need to schedule a room at noon. Does that work?
Yes.
Yes. Let's schedule it for noon to 4.
Perfect.
And just work well around with some other options for you guys.
Even if we have to take, 5-minute break. Yeah, in between the 2 hours. Might be
If anyone needs to break lunch.
Be even better if you guys bought lunch.
And just start going back.
The chairs get to buy lunch, don't they?
So going back to, the retirement age, I was not watching the chat when everyone was talking. Polygraph said DOC would prefer 62. Yeah.
All right. Hearing nothing else, plan for a long meeting. 20. You're negotiating. All right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm here. I'm not messing up. No, you need to do something serious. You need to be down there. Oh, that's our real vehicle.